When we are using Azure storage account, we can use few different redundancy options available for us. These redundancy options are to provide higher availability and higher durability. What is availability? Availability is a property which indicates whether the data is accessible for us. Whenever we want, we should be able to access the data. So that is what availability means. And durability means how safe the data is from corruption and similar kind of issues. So if the data is corrupt, the data might be available, but it will not be in a state for us to use. So durability is another property which basically indicates how safe our stored data is. Okay. So this is not talking about the security. This is talking about how reliable our underlying storage is, so the data is intact without any corruption. So that is what a durability means. So with redundancy, we'll be achieving higher availability and higher durability. And the redundancy options available for us to use within Azure are locally redundant storage, zone redundant storage, geo redundant storage, geo zone redundant storage. We will look at each of these in detail, but before going into them, let's first understand the physical structure of Azure data centers. Okay. So in Azure, we have something called geography. Geography is like a discrete market where we will have one or more regions. Think of US as one geography and Europe as another geography. And within US, we'll have many different regions. Okay. So this could be US East or US West. So these are different regions. And within these regions, we'll have data centers. So if you see here, we have a region, which is the green box. And within this, we have a data center. And in some regions, we will also have these data centers grouped into something called availability zones. Okay, so these blue boxes are availability zones. So this particular region supports availability zones. So the data centers are grouped into availability zones. But on this particular region, we don't have support for availability zones. So the data centers are not grouped within the availability zones. Okay, so that is the physical structure of data centers used by Azure. Now that is out of the way, let's start with locally redundant storage. When you are creating storage account, you'll be able to specify what type of redundancy you want. When you choose locally redundant storage, what will happen is each file or each record that you create within your Azure storage account will be copied 3 times synchronously. Synchronously means when you are saving the data, the save operation will complete only after all these 3 copies are written to the disk. Okay, so that is what synchronous means. So when you are writing a file, 3 copies will be made for those files, and those 3 copies will be saved in the same data center. Okay, so if you see here, we have a geography region, and within that we have a data center, and 3 copies of the files are stored within the same data center. So this is what locally redundant storage means. We are basically making a redundant copy of our files within the same data center. So we make 3 copies to be exact. And this is by far one of the cheapest redundancy options available for us to use. But this is not immune to data center wide outage. So if the whole data center is gone for some reason, then all of your data will be lost. It will not be recoverable. Okay. And in terms of the durability, because we make 3 different copies, it comes with really high durability, which is, 99.9, and it goes 11 nines. Okay. So this is over a year. So this is actually really, really high durability. The chance of your data getting corrupt is really, really low. See, this durability is not talking about the data center outage. This is talking about the reliability of the underlying hardware, like, how reliable the hard disk is, whether the data written to those disks will stay intact or not. This is not talking about the whole data center going down. This is talking about the reliability of the data stored in the drives and how intact they are. Okay, so that is really high. But the problem is, like we have previously said, this is not immune to data center wide outage. So in many cases, this might not be suitable for you because you're still making 3 copies, but all those 3 copies are within the same data center. If the data center is gone, all your data are gone. So the next better option is to go with zone redundant storage. And remember, this can only be used in a regions where we have availability zones support. Okay, not all regions have availability zones. Wherever you have availability zones, you'll be able to make use of this zone redundant storage. So this is very similar to locally redundant storage. This will also make 3 copies of the files synchronously, but those copies will be placed in 3 different availability zones. So normally when we have availability zones within a region, we'll have minimum of 3 availability zones. And because we are making 3 copies of each of our files, those copies will be spread across all 3 availability zones. So if a whole availability zone is gone, then we'll still have other 2 copies that will provide us high availability and durability. Okay. And if a whole availability zone is gone for some reason, then we will not notice any differences because Microsoft behind the scene will take care of all the DNS repointing. So we will not have any disruption. We won't even notice it. We won't even notice that one of the availability zone is gone. In terms of cost, this is going to cost more because the data is going to be copied across 3 different availability zones and they are actually 3 different physical data centers. It is going to be costing slightly more. And in terms of durability, this comes with 12 nines. So this is a lot better compared to locally redundant storage because locally redundant storage uses 11 nines, but this one comes with 12 nines. Okay. And the problem with the zone redundant storage is that it is not immune to region-wide outage. So if the whole region is gone, this region has all of our data centers and availability zones. So all the data that we stored in all these availability zones and data centers will be gone. So this is not immune to region-wide outage. Although it is very, very rare, it is still possible. And if that happens, the data will be gone. So far, both locally redundant storage and zone redundant storage talks about replicating data within the same region. So this could be your primary region, and within the primary region, we are replicating the data. So if you want region-wide outage immunity, then you need to replicate your data to other regions. So normally you'll be replicating that to your paired region or a secondary region. So the next 2 options that we are going to see are all about how we can replicate the data to our secondary regions as well while keeping the data durable and making them highly available. So the first one of those is called geo-redundant storage. So in geo-redundant storage, what we will be doing is we'll be doing exactly what we have done for locally redundant storage, but we will be doing that in 2 different regions. So if you take this example, this is your primary region, and in your primary region, you'll be making 3 copies of your files synchronously. This will be your locally redundant storage. And then copies of these files will be made to your secondary region. And within the secondary region also, you'll be making 3 copies. But the data copy from your primary region to secondary region will happen asynchronously. What it means? It means when you're writing some data to your primary storage, for example, the write operation will complete as soon as it made 3 copies within that particular region. Okay. Then after you have completed your save, asynchronously, Microsoft will copy that file into your secondary region and it will make 3 copies there. Your function or code, whatever that initiated the write operation will not wait for the copy to be made in your secondary region. It will only wait for the copy to be made within your primary region. Then it will inform that the operation was complete. It will not wait for the copy in the secondary region to be made. Okay, because that copying is happening asynchronously. Okay, but as you can already see, because we are making a copy of the files in the secondary region, this is immune to region-wide outage. Okay. Even if the whole region is gone, we can actually fail over to this region and you can continue to use the files available there. And because we are making a copy in another region, the cost of this will be slightly higher or even much higher. And the durability of this is actually 69. This is actually significantly higher than zone redundant as well as locally redundant. Okay. But the problem here is actually, yes, we are making a copy across 2 regions, but what if both data centers, the data is copied in one of the data centers in your primary region and one of the data centers in secondary region, something happens and both of these data centers are affected because, it could happen, right? So both of these data centers are affected because you're unlucky, then all of your data are gone. Okay. So even better option is to combine zone redundancy as well as geo redundancy. So how we can do that? So that is what geo zone redundant storage is all about. So what you will do is within your primary region, you will be using zone redundancy, and within your secondary region, you will be using local redundancy. So The write operation in your primary region will complete as soon as the copy is made to all 3 availability zones. Then asynchronously the data will be copied across to your secondary region, and within the secondary region we'll be making 3 copies to implement local redundancy. Okay, so that is what geo-zone redundant storage means. And obviously the cost of this is really high, and the durability is almost same as what we get for the geo redundancy. Okay, so normally when data is copied to your secondary regions in both geo-zone redundancy as well as geo-redundant storage, the data available in your secondary region will not be accessible unless you fail over to your secondary region. So normally when you are having this region as your primary region, the data are copied into your secondary region, but these data will not be readable. Okay, so that is by default. But if you want to make this data readable, you can enable it. So you can enable read access to your secondary region. So you will continue to write to your primary region and the data will be copied across to your secondary region asynchronously, and the data available in your secondary region can be read by some clients. So they cannot write to it because this is not your primary data source, but they can read from it. Okay, and this is available only if you explicitly enable it, and if you do have enabled it, then we call them as read access geo redundant storage and read access geo zone redundant storage. So this is a slight variation to geo redundant storage and geo zone redundant storage because we allow secondary regions data to be readable by our clients. Okay, so that is all I wanted to share about Azure storage redundancy. I hope this is useful. Thank you.